everyone, welcome to this week's first installment of BonaFriday with our community members. Today I'm sitting here with my good friend, Pat Lund. Pat has spent over 30 years serving in the public schools as well as a social entrepreneur in the nonprofit world, working on education, hunger, and housing issues. Today he works for Habitat for Humanity, serving older homeowners, working alongside them in their effort to remain living in their homes as long as possible. I, as always, first wanted to give some space for Pat to give an overview of Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity. So, Pat, would you mind giving us an overview?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of people know what Habitat for Humanity is. You know, we build homes in our communities to help those who can't afford a house, maybe the traditional way, be able to buy a house and afford to live in a nice neighborhood.
Definitely, yeah. And you often mention creating and preserving home ownership in a very equitable manner.
Yeah. Yep.
What would that look like for all of us?
Right. So we create home ownership, like by building and selling homes, but I work on the other side where we preserve home ownership. So people who already have their home, we help them fix it up, or we help modify the home, okay, so that they can preserve a decent place to live, okay? And for both creating and preserving, what we really try to do here in the Twin Cities is do it in an equitable manner. And what that means is that in many communities, as well as our community, is that there's a big disparity between white people who own homes and people of color. So it's a disparity of about 75% to 25%. And so Habitat works really hard to sell 75% of the homes that we build and sell to people of color to help balance that out. Now we have a long way to go, but that's what we want to do in our community so that everyone can have a safe, decent place to call home.
Definitely. What would you say, for you specifically, when you are approaching meeting a community's needs, what would you say is your personal approach as you are interacting with homeowners?
Yeah, so I work with our Age Well at Home program. So what we do is we modify the homes with older adults. Okay, and so it's kind of unique because we partner with healthcare providers, and they refer to us people who are low income and who are struggling to stay in their homes. And then we come alongside homeowners, we listen to their needs, and we help them modify them so they can live there as long as possible.
Definitely. That's really cool. What would you say is, whether it's partnerships, working with the homeowners, what would you say is the biggest challenge facing the Age Well at Home program right now?
Yeah, probably it's during this pandemic, everything is kind of magnified. And I think one of the things is that, you know, older homeowners tend to be more isolated. They're retired and maybe they don't get around as much. And so this pandemic is really exasperating those issues. And so for us, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a space where we can help them not only create a safe environment inside their home, but create a safe environment outside so they can get out in the community if they so desire to do that. So it's kind of a twofold thing. Help them keep safe when they want to be at home, and then help them leave their home safely if they want to do that.
Definitely. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing there are probably multiple ways for folks like me or who are watching who, you know, often I've been on a Habitat project before where I've, you know, helped, you know, put together siding on a house and things like that. And I'm guessing that's how most people know Habitat. Most people have heard.
Did you have a good time?
I had an awesome time. Yeah, it was great. I got to do it with my coworkers, which was really fun.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a lot of corporations, that seems to be a fun way for them to get out in the community and help Habitat in that way.
Yeah.
What would you say, it probably requires a lot of people and moving parts for those who are watching, or for those who are like me who want to get involved, what might that look like?
Sure. So you mentioned corporations, but we have churches, we have community groups, we have individuals, okay, who want to come out and volunteer. And part of it is helping us build, and part of us is just helping to educate you on the needs for affordable housing, whether it's creating it or preserving it, or trying to be more equitable in our community so that, you know, everyone has a fair shot of getting buying a home. So we have needs for volunteers in a variety of ways. So we need volunteers on like something that you did, building a home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We need volunteers on helping us fix up houses. Mm-hmm. We need volunteers at our thrift store. Maybe you've heard of our thrift store where we sell used goods, used homeowner goods. So we have a store in New Brighton and a store in South Minneapolis. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing about that, every purchase that you make goes to create or preserve home ownership. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. And so if you have things that you want to donate, you can donate. If you want to come and volunteer at the stores, you can do that as well. So there's a number of things you can do. If you just want to advocate for us with your local government or at the legislature, we always need people helping us get the word out for affordable housing. Yeah. So that's another way that you can. So we need volunteers. Again, you don't have to come as a group. You can come as an individual or with a spouse or a friend. Just come, show up, and you don't even need to know anything about a hammer or a paintbrush. You come and we'll teach you.
You'll put us to work?
We'll put you to work and you'll have a great time.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
And now, Habitat for Humanity is obviously a great way to get involved in the community in this way. For folks who are maybe in a city who, I mean, it sounds like there are Habitat for Humanity in quite the number of places around the country. If folks weren't to get involved with Habitat for Humanity, what encouragement would you give them to still get involved in this issue? Yeah,
so I would find a local community, a local housing nonprofit in their community. Mm-hmm. There's a number of them out there. I would do that. You could also just educate yourself on the needs of equitable, affordable housing and get plugged in that way. Get to know your state representatives. Get to know your state senators. And see what your local communities are doing about affordable housing. Contact your local community development corporation. So every county has a community development organization, and that's where you get information about housing in your community. So that's another way. Some churches are involved with affordable housing.
Yeah.
And they go and they help not only the people who are in their congregation, but they help their neighbors fix up their homes. And so that's another way that you can get involved. So a lot of ways to get involved. Service organizations like the Lions and is another great way to volunteer in your community. So a lot of different opportunities.
Seems like there's plenty out there. It probably takes some initiative on our parts to get involved.
Yep, and the great thing is there's Google.
We do live in the digital age.
Absolutely.
Where you can definitely.
Yeah.
And now also, you mentioned, churches get involved. From my understanding, Habitat for Humanity is a Christian nonprofit, has Christian roots.
Christian roots, Christian values. Yeah. Absolutely. And it's really important for Habitat that we focus in on justice issues. And Jesus talked about being just and about being equitable. And so, Jesus has had a big impact on my life, and I feel really blessed. So, working at Habitat is a way that I can bless others with the blessing that I've received. And so I do it to help all people get a safe, decent place to live. It's the right thing to do, and I think it's what Jesus would do.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And we mentioned a little bit that the pandemic and just the distributing of housing between different people groups in our communities.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest challenge in that realm for reaching that, for kind of, I don't know, fixing that is the right word?
Yeah, maybe balancing
that.
things out. Yeah, I think it's critical, especially for what I would call the white community, that we understand the advantages that we've had to education, to jobs, and to housing, and that we understand that privilege, and so that we make sure that folks who may not have had that privilege elevate those needs, so that people know that we need to balance things out, because right now they're out of whack. And Minnesota is in the top 3 in terms of inequities in housing.
Wow.
So we think of ourselves as a very progressive state, but in terms of fair housing, we're one of the worst offenders. And so, and that's not saying, that quote, we're bad people, but what we need to do is we need to educate ourselves and to understand the advantages that we've had growing up and the connections we've had to whether get an education or get housing, and to realize whether you're a foundational black person or Latino or Native American, that you haven't had those opportunities, even though there are laws in the books. In practical manner, we've had a lot of things that have just not been right and fair for people of color. And so, I don't know if you knew this, but Jesus was a person of color.
Was he now?
Sometimes we want to think that that wasn't maybe the case, that he was a white Anglo-Saxon, but nope, he really was. And Jesus was he really identified with the homeless and the poor and the oppressed. And to me, we need to lift up those needs as he lifted up those needs. And that's why I'm so passionate about doing this with Habitat.
Yeah.
And Habitat as an organization is passionate. And it's really come out even much greater this past year with the murder of George Floyd. Yeah. That's really had a big impact on my life. And has really kind of made me recommit to really breaking down barriers for especially those who are black, to make sure that their plight, their needs, their struggles are elevated. So I want to be an ally to really listen, because for many years, I've been serving my community, but for many years I've been really ignorant and really not engaged like I should to really understand those needs in our community. And unfortunately, a lot of people have died and have been murdered because we really don't understand the needs and the oppression of people of color that have gone on for many years. Again, laws may have been changed, but the practical day-to-day workings have not changed for a lot of people.
Definitely. You talked a little bit just about how you're coming to reflect on these things and how you're being impacted and learning, and how you want to be an ally. If we take a step back and look at Habitat as a whole, how is Habitat learning within this whole situation and recommitting themselves to this mission of reaching that community that has often been unreached as much?
Yeah, so we're doing it both at the national level. So our national office is down in Atlanta. So we're doing it on a national level, and also here in the Twin Cities on the local level. So what we're doing is we're bringing people of color in to do workshops and to teach us just exactly what is it that's been going on and how can we make changes, whether it's just hiring people of color or getting them to volunteer. We need to be more engaged in our communities, especially in communities that have been marginalized and historically oppressed. We need to be more engaged with them and know that it's not on their all about what they need to do. It's we're in the majority in terms of, you know, numbers of people. We need to step up and lock arms with them and say, hey, we're here to help. We want to make changes. And sometimes it's really confessing that we've been a passive participant in some of this, you know. And that's not to guilt people. It's just to say, you know, we haven't understood fully what's been going on because we've been kind of disengaged and kind of doing our own thing. But I think it's important, especially for those who have Christian values and take Jesus as their example, to follow his lead. You know, he sacrificed everything for us, and it's important that we sacrifice and serve our communities and show the light and life that's in him. And I've chosen that in one way through Habitat for Humanity.
It's really wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
As you're going through this, and as you know, you guys were making progress, and whether it's Age Well at Home or just Habitat for Humanity in general, Twin Cities Habitat for Humanity in general, how have you personally been encouraged or discouraged in just the progress being made so far? For your program specifically, or the wider?
Yeah. I think the discouragement is to realize just how big the disparities are between whites and people of color. I mean, there's such a huge need. But I'm encouraged by so many people I've seen step up and they want to help. They just want to understand, because part of it is just understanding where you're coming from, where you'd like to go, and how you can make an impact. Because I think people are looking to make an impact in their communities, have more purpose and meaning to life, and this is a way that they can do it. And so I'm encouraged by those in our communities who are stepping up to help.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And people are stepping up to help in a variety of ways with Habitat for Humanity, whether that's home building or being an advocate or educating yourself. If you could say I don't know if you can do this, if you could say, like, if there was one way that you wanted to speak to everyone, say, here's our biggest need going forward, is that something that you can pinpoint? Is that something that...
Probably a couple of things.
Okay.
Number one, I'd say educate yourself on affordable housing and what it means to be a just and equitable person in this area. And the other thing is, you know, because of the pandemic, we need a lot of volunteers. You know, I don't know, a lot of people just aren't comfortable yet coming out on site, but we practice really safe protocols. So you'll if you come out, you'll wear a mask. You keep socially distant, but you can still make an impact. So I think those are two things that you can do. And you know, if you go to our website, tchabitat.org, you can get a lot of information about educating yourself, about volunteering, a variety of ways of supporting habitat and affordable housing.
That sounds like a great plan to me. Last, but certainly not least, actually it probably is least, one last final question. Who's your favorite son?
Oh, well, I don't, you know, if someone was you know, going to put me on the spot.
Yeah.
I would have to say Louis.
Huey, Dewey. So Louis would be the youngest, which means me?
Well, you could say that, or you could say It's more of a band of brothers.
Oh.
Huey, Louie, and Dewey.
You see, I thought I was going to be able to get him on camera saying that I'm his favorite son, but it didn't work as well as I'd hoped.
Yeah. I have 3 favorite sons.
You have 3 favorite sons. Okay.
And you are one of them. How's that?
I'll always take that. Well, I appreciate you sitting down with me and chatting about Habitat for Humanity and the impact both Age Well at Home is making in the community, as well as Habitat for Humanity as a whole, and how we can get involved and come alongside.
Good to be here, Connor. I love what you're doing.